The air smelled of whiskey, dust, and something mean. Men laughed too loud, boots scuffing the dirt while the deputy shouted numbers that meant a man's life. Clara stood near the edge of the crowd, her fingers tight around the strap of her satchel. She hadn't meant to stop here. She was only passing through Ash Hollow, headed west with her herbs and her silence. But something about the noise pulled her in, the way cruelty always did. The man on the platform barely looked human anymore. Shackles on his wrists, mud on his face, shoulders bruised from the chain. Silas Gage, they called him. The beast who'd killed the sheriff's son in a drunken fight behind the saloon. The story changed every time she overheard it. In one, he tore the boy apart with his bare hands. In another, he just stood there while the boy bled out. Whatever the truth was, the town needed someone to hate, and he fit the part. She told herself to walk away. The last thing she needed was another cause. But when she saw him raise his head, just a little, and meet the crowd's jeering faces without a word, she felt something twist deep inside her chest. Not pity, recognition. The deputy laughed. $2 and you can make the monster clean your stables. More laughter. Clara's voice cut through it, steady but quiet. I'll pay 10. It was the kind of silence that turns even the wind shy. Every head turned. The deputy blinked like he hadn't heard right. Lady, you know what he did? I know what you're doing, she said. And it's uglier. She didn't even remember pulling the little pouch of coins from her satchel. All she knew was that her hands didn't shake. The silver hit the wooden rail with a dull clink that seemed to echo too long. Silas looked up then, properly. His eyes weren't wild like they said, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from sleepless nights but from carrying a past that won't die. As the deputy unlocked the chains, Clara wondered when she'd started doing foolish things for strangers. Maybe it was back in Deadwood when her brother never came home from the mines. Maybe it was when she'd realized no one had come looking for him. Some people break loud. She broke quiet. Come on, she said softly, not waiting to see if he'd follow. You can walk beside me, not behind. He hesitated. The crowd didn't. They laughed again, but this time she noticed a few faces look away. Shame had a way of spreading when someone else refused to play along. They reached the edge of town before either spoke. The sky hung heavy, turning the world the color of rust. You don't know what I am, he said finally, his voice rough from disuse. No, she said, but I know what you aren't. He almost smiled. Almost. But his wrists were bleeding, and his pride was worse off. She handed him a rag. He didn't thank her, and she didn't need him to. The road out of Ash Hollow stretched empty ahead. She had a half-rotten cabin waiting beyond the ridge, one she'd been fixing for a week before moving on. Now it seemed she wasn't moving on after all. She caught herself glancing at him in the fading light. Broad shoulders, scars at the base of his neck, a man who'd known work before he'd known violence. You can stay until the snow, she said. After that, you decide where to go. He nodded once, like a man accepting a sentence he didn't understand. Behind them, laughter rose again from the square. The sound of a town sure it had seen a fool by her own ruin. Clara didn't look back. She only thought, maybe ruin's the only thing left that can be rebuilt right. And when the first snowflake touched her sleeve, she almost smiled, because somewhere behind her, she heard him say her name for the first time. The first night in the cabin was quieter than any jail Silas had known. Too quiet, maybe. The roof creaked when the wind turned, and every sound, the kettle, the floorboards, her light footsteps, felt too close, too human. He sat near the stove, hands raw from splitting kindling, trying to remember what warmth was supposed to feel like. Clara moved about with a kind of worn grace, measuring water, stirring something thin in a tin pot. She didn't talk much. That suited him fine. Every word felt like a test he wasn't ready to take. Eat, she said finally, setting the bowl beside him. He looked at it, pale beans, a few scraps of onion, and then at her. You always feed strays? Her mouth twitched. Only the ones that look like they might bite. He almost laughed, but it caught somewhere in his throat. The steam fogged the air between them. She sat on the other side of the table, hands wrapped around her own bowl, eating slow like she'd learned to make a little last. He'd heard talk in town before the arrest. A widow, some kind of healer, came west after her brother died. They said she lived alone, talked to herself sometimes, carried herbs like a witch. The way they said it, she was halfway to being a ghost. But sitting here, watching her shoulders rise and fall with steady breath, she looked more alive than anyone he'd met in years. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. "Back there." Clara didn't look up. "Because no one else would." "That's not an answer." She stirred her spoon, quiet for a long time. "Maybe I wanted to see if a man could be more than what they say about him." He didn't know what to do with that. So he finished the beans, wiped the bowl clean, and said nothing. When she stepped outside to fetch water, he noticed the limp in her walk, small, favoring the left leg. Probably old injury. Probably something she wouldn't talk about. He knew the kind. Everyone in this country carried one, only most people hid theirs under anger or prayer. That night, he lay awake on the floor, listening to the wind pull through the cracks. She'd left the lantern burning low, the flame making a soft halo around her as she slept in the corner cot. Her hair had come loose from its tie. She looked younger that way, not soft, just less guarded. He wondered how long it had been since she'd trusted anyone enough to sleep near them. When morning came, he was already outside, fixing the fence behind the cabin. It wasn't much, half-rotted, leaning like it wanted to quit. But working gave him something to do besides think. The air was cold enough to sting. His hands bled again before noon, but he didn't stop. Clara watched from the doorway, her shawl pulled tight. "You don't have to do that." He shrugged. "I know. You trying to pay me back?" "Trying to remember what I'm for." She nodded slowly. "Then start with fixing the door." It never did close right. By sunset he had. The wind no longer whistled through the cracks. Inside, the air felt softer, like the world outside had finally stayed where it belonged. That night, while they sat by the stove, she told him about Deadwood, about her brother, the mine collapse, the letter that came too late. Her voice didn't tremble once. When she finished, he said only, "He was lucky to have you." She looked into the fire, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to show she'd heard the truth in it. Outside, the wolves started up again. Inside, the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something unspoken, something that felt like the first step toward living again. By the third week, Ash Hollow started whispering again. It always did, about anyone who tried to live quiet. Word traveled fast in small places, especially when there was peace to ruin. Clara noticed it first at the general store. The woman behind the counter, Mrs. Adkins, used to greet her with polite smiles. Now she barely nodded, eyes darting past her to the man waiting outside with the wagon. Silas didn't come in anymore, not after the first time she saw how people looked at him, the way they stepped aside as if cruelty might be contagious. Back at the cabin, she unpacked the flour and salt, pretending the silence didn't follow her home. But it did. It always did. "You shouldn't come to town," she said finally, handing him a tin cup of coffee. "I didn't say a word to them." "That's not what they see," she murmured. He took a long sip, the heat biting his throat. "Let them talk. I've been worse things than gossip." "I know," she said softly. "But I haven't." That made him pause. She wasn't angry, not really. Just tired. Tired of being the woman who tried to do right and still paid for it. He knew that kind of tired. For a while, they didn't talk about town anymore. The days settled into a rhythm. Mending fences, hauling water, small talk about weather that wasn't ever small at all. He'd fix something. She'd fuss that he was overdoing it. He'd shrug, and she'd shake her head, half amused, half concerned. One afternoon, he caught her humming near the stove. Something old, maybe from her mother's time. He stopped in the doorway, not wanting to break the spell. She noticed anyway. "What?" she said, turning. "You sound like someone who forgot she was lonely." Her smile faded slow but gentle. "Maybe I did. It should have been a simple day." But that evening, a rider came up the trail, dust on his coat, badge glinting in the low sun. Deputy Royce, the sheriff's brother. Clara was chopping wood out back when she heard the hooves. By the time she reached the yard, Royce had already swung off his horse, his smirk as sharp as the wind. "Well," he said, "didn't think the good doctor had a taste for beasts." Silas stepped between them before she could speak. His jaw was tight, his voice low. "You got something worth saying, say it." Royce laughed. "Just reminding her what kind of man she's keeping company with." "Folks in town don't forget." Clara's voice cut through, steady as ever. "Then they should remember right. He's done more honest work in a month than half your deputies in a year." Royce's smile thinned. Careful, ma'am. I'd hate to see your fine reputation end up same as his. He turned and rode off slow, dust curling up behind him like smoke. Silas stood there a long moment after, shoulders tight, fists closed. Clara wanted to tell him not to mind it, that words were just wind, but she knew better. Words cut deeper when you've spent years being called something you're not. That night he sat outside under the stars, sharpening his knife just to keep his hands busy. Clara brought him coffee, wrapped her shawl tighter. "They'll come around," she said quietly. He looked at her, something weary but alive in his eyes. "And if they don't?" "Then we'll keep fixing fences," she said. "Till they see the difference." He didn't smile, not exactly. But when she turned to go inside, he whispered something so soft it almost disappeared into the dark. "You make me forget what I was." And for the first time in years, the night didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a pause before something that might still be good. The fire started just past midnight, a red flicker against the hills, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind catches up. Silas saw it first through the window, a soft orange pulse turning the dark alive. "Stay inside," he told Clara, grabbing his coat. But she was already pulling on her boots. "Don't tell me what to do," she shot back, voice sharp with fear. They ran. The smell hit before the heat did. Resin, smoke, and old timber. The sawmill at the edge of town was burning like a pyre, sparks jumping into the sky. Men were shouting, hauling buckets, but the wind was too strong. Silas didn't think. He just moved. He ripped open a side door and dragged out whoever was still inside. His arms burned, lungs clawed for air. Somewhere behind him, Clara shouted his name. When it was finally over, the mill was half gone. The sky black as pitch, and the whispers had already started. By dawn, he was the one they blamed. The sheriff didn't even look surprised when he came up the path. 2 deputies flanked him, rifles slung easy, like this was routine. "We found your hammer at the scene," he said. "You got something you want to confess?" Silas just stared at him, ash still on his face. "Yeah," he said flatly. "I confess I build fences with it. Maybe you'd like to check those too." Clara stepped between them before it went further. "He was here," she said. "All night. You want proof?" "I'll swear it before your church and your God." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You sure you want to tie your good name to his?" "I already did," she said. "And it's worth more than yours." The men left, but not before one of them spat in the dirt near Silas's boots. When the sound of horses faded, Clara turned to him. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll keep coming till they've got something to hang you for." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture heavy with years of the same fight. "Then maybe I should go before they get the chance." "No," she said, and her voice broke just enough for him to hear the truth in it. "If you leave, they'll say they were right. That's what they want." He wanted to believe her. But that night, sitting by the dead fire, her words turned over and over in his head, the weight of every town that ever decided a man's guilt before his story. The next day, Royce showed up again, eyes red, shirt reeking of whiskey. "You think you fooled them?" He sneered. "You'll hang same as the mill. Maybe she'll burn with you." Silas lunged before he thought, but Clara's voice stopped him cold. "No." Just one word, calm, clear, and firm enough to hold him in place. Then the preacher spoke. He'd come quietly from behind, hat in hand. "That's enough, Royce," he said. "I saw you near the mill before it burned. Everything stilled. Even the wind seemed to listen." Royce's face drained white. He stammered something about tending horses, but no one cared. The truth was out, and this time it didn't belong to him. When it was over, Clara wrapped Silas's burned hands in clean linen. Neither spoke for a long while. Then he said quietly, "You should have let me go." She looked up, eyes shining with that same stubborn fire. "I didn't buy your freedom to watch you run from it." Outside, the last embers of the mill smoldered under the gray morning light. And for the first time, Ash Hollow didn't look at him like a beast, but like a man who'd finally outlasted the flames. By the time spring reached Ash Hollow, the smoke smell had finally left the air. Or maybe Clara just stopped noticing it. The mill stood half rebuilt, boards bright and clean against the old charred wood. Men worked in the mornings and nodded at Silas when he passed. Some even tipped their hats. It wasn't friendship yet, but it wasn't fear anymore either. He still woke before dawn, out of habit. Some wounds didn't heal. They just learned to live with daylight. Clara would find him sitting on the porch, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold, watching the mist rise off the fields. Sometimes she joined him, sometimes she just let him be. "Looks like rain," she said one morning, pulling her shawl tight. He glanced at the sky. "We could use it," she smiled faintly. "You're getting domestic, Gage." "Careful," he said. "You make it sound like I belong here." She didn't answer right away. Just looked out over the land, the fence lines they'd fixed, the garden she'd planted, the life they hadn't planned but somehow built anyway. After the fire, the town had changed toward her, too. People stopped whispering quite so loud. Mrs. Adkins even sent a pie once, claiming it was extra. Clara didn't believe her, but she accepted it all the same. That's what survival looked like sometimes, taking peace wherever it offered itself. One afternoon, a few children from the edge of town came by. Clara had been giving out herbs and remedies for free since the fire, and now the children brought her a sack of wildflower seeds in return. "Mama said you make things grow," one of them said. Silas leaned against the porch post, listening, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Later, after the children left, Clara poured the seeds into her palm, tiny, weightless things. "Funny," she said, "how something this small can change what a place looks like." He watched her hands. "Maybe that's how you changed me." She looked up then, met his eyes for the first time in what felt like days. "You changed yourself," she said. "I just didn't let you quit halfway." They didn't talk much after that. But the quiet was easy now, not heavy like before. More like music only the two of them could hear. That evening, while the wind picked up, Silas went to check the barn. The horses shifted, restless, smelling the storm before it came. He ran his hand along the railing, remembering the first night she'd brought him here. How small and broken this place had felt then. How she'd looked at him like a man worth saving. He hadn't believed her then. He almost did now. When the first drops hit the roof, he went back inside. Clara was by the stove, lighting the lamp. The glow spread slow, turning the room soft and gold. He stood there for a moment, watching her move. The steady hands, the calm in her shoulders. For years he'd been a man trying to prove he wasn't a monster. Tonight he just felt human. "You're quiet," she said, glancing up. "Just thinking. Dangerous habit." He smiled, faint but real. "Maybe. But it's good thinking." She handed him a bowl of stew, the kind that always tasted like more work than ingredients. "Eat," she said. "Tomorrow you fix the porch step you keep pretending not to see." "Yes, ma'am," he said, and she laughed. A sound he hadn't heard in weeks. The kind that filled the room fuller than firelight ever could. Outside, the rain came steady, washing the last of the winter dust away. They sat together, the storm tapping gentle against the windows. No words left, no ghosts needing to speak. Just the quiet after everything that tried to burn them down. And when the lamp flickered low, Clara leaned back and said softly, almost to herself, "You're home now." Silas didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just reached for her hand, rough, warm, real, and held it, while the rain kept falling on the cabin they'd built out of second chances.